So I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker this afternoon, David Harris. David is the founder of the Global Lives Project, a video library of life experience from around the world, produced by thousands of collaborating filmmakers, photographers, and translators. David was appointed as Chancellor's Public Scholar in 2015 here at UC Berkeley for his teaching at the Haas School of Business, where he teaches courses on civic technology, social movements and social media, and scenario planning and futures thinking. So with regard to that, he's also a research director at the Institute for the Future. He conducts research on the future of philanthropy, media, governance, and social movements. He's presented his work and has published widely in a range of publications. I encourage you to, at the close of the event, to pick up one of the brochures about his project that are at the back, and also to see the installation, which is now live in our Tech Museum. And want to give a big shout out to our curator, Dan Chapman, in the back, who also was instrumental in making that happen. So please join me in welcoming our esteemed speaker, David Harris.
Thank you so much, Camille. It's really an honor to be here, and I have to extend a thank you to you as well. Camille came to visit my class on civic technology last year, and that turned into this blossoming collaboration that led to the exhibit that's out there in the CITRIS Tech Museum. And it's been just a fantastic opportunity to work with CITRIS and the Beneteau Institute. And I also should thank Brandy. I don't know if Brandy is here, Brandy Nonaki. She's been critical in making this happen. Dan Chapman is actually a genius in the way that he put together the exhibit out there. So thank you so much for this past almost a year of collaborating on this. And the exhibit just opened today. So I also have just a few other people in the audience that I really need to thank, which are, I think Daniel Chen is here. Daniel's in the back. Daniel is a board member of the Global Lives Project, and he really produced this exhibit as well as the other exhibits that are going to be taking place on the Berkeley campus that you'll soon hear more about. And Cheryl Martinez and Cap Stan, who are here at CITRIS, have been great partners in thinking about media and in all of its different forms. Also, some of my students are here. Christy Drutman, Lubna Sebastian, Melissa Kai, Daisy Mendez, Michelle Lafort are all up here in the front. And they've been my students in a few different, also Kojin Glick is one of my students is in the audience. An admin on UC Berkeley Memes for Edgy Teens. If you have problems with that, talk to him. Yeah, but my students actually have been part of two different programs at Berkeley that have been really helpful. The Undergraduate Research Apprenticeship Program and the American Cultures Engaged Scholarship Program. And those two programs have offered me research support to make all of this possible. So I actually wanted to start with, let's see, maybe I wanted to start with an invitation to reflexive sociology. So I'm a sociologist. Reflexivity is a perilous concept in the social sciences, but also important. Perilous because you risk, you have to toe this fine line between disclosure of bias and rejection of objectivity and solipsism. But I'm going to try to stay closer to the disclosure of bias and actually give you a little bit of where I'm coming from side. Do we have any sociologists or sociology students in the audience? Oh, we've got one. Okay. So Pierre Bourdieu wrote this book. This has really informed a lot of how I think and the background of Global Lives. So I was actually born here. I couldn't control it. It was, does anyone recognize this building? This is Stanford University Hospital. I grew up in Silicon Valley, and I attended Mountain View High School. In 1999, I graduated, and that same year, Google moved to Mountain View. And the town really wasn't big enough for the two of us, so I had to get out quickly. And I came to I went somewhere very, very far away, culturally, politically, but actually very close geographically, which was here. And I was an undergrad here, and I like to think that these two places, Berkeley and Silicon Valley, have actually informed my perspective in actually a connected way, in that these are, while the politics may differ, these are really places where people believe that if you see a problem in the world, you should do something about it, and you have the agency to change it. That might be building an app to help people order cat food, or it might be starting the free speech movement. These are different things, or continuing the free speech movement in different ways, right? But in any case, I was deeply informed by coming of age in this university. When I was a sophomore, I did the UC-DC program, and I traveled to Washington, D.C. I did an internship in the Clinton administration in the White House at the Council on Environmental Quality. that was another experience that sent me running as fast as I could back to California, back to Berkeley. I learned a lot from the experience, and I saw that it's actually really hard to change policy, even if you're the President of the United States. As was the case, Bill Clinton really could not achieve his goals for climate change, which was at the time the issue that I was most focused on. He really did not, and along with Al Gore's support, didn't get anywhere. And that's what got me thinking about other countries, other parts of the world, and it's also what got me thinking about cultural change and the ways in which cultural change precedes political change. After I graduated from Berkeley, I moved to Brazil, and I did a master's degree in sociology at the University of Sao Paulo. This was my university there. And as I was in Brazil, I actually studied inequality. I was very focused on the specific relationship between domestic workers and their employers, maids, nannies, and their employers, and the way that inequality is discussed and reproduced in this very, very intimate context of the household. How people think about the people that literally serve them. I spent a lot of time on that. And as I was there, I also started thinking about the Global Lives Project. And a woman in Palo Alto at this place, the Institute for the Future, caught word of the Global Lives Project and also saw an episode of a online micro soap opera in which I played a cameo as an American banker living in Brazil. And that cameo, along with the work on the Global Lives Project, was enough to get me recruited to be an expert at the Institute for the Future. This is the Institute for the Future. This is a fashion show that I actually helped to curate called the Apocalypse Project that explores the futures of climate change through fashion. And this is actually the work of an outside artist that we brought in. At the Institute for the Future, where I've been a research director and had a few other jobs over the last 10 years, I've had the opportunity and luck to do research on a really broad variety of topics. Since this is the CITRIS Research Exchange, I thought it would be worth just mentioning a little bit about the topics that I'm working on in addition to the Global Lives Project before I dig in. One is the Governance Futures Lab. Along with some colleagues, I started our Governance Futures Lab at the Institute for the Future, and I've been working for the past few years on a research topic called Leapfrog Democracy, looking specifically at how smaller or younger or recently restored democracies can innovate on democracy faster, better, and experiment more easily than us, the legacy democracies that I talk about. This is actually a topic that I spend a lot of time on as well in my course on civic technology that Kojin took and that Lubna took also. And that will be offered, it's a freshman sophomore seminar, it will be offered in the spring again this year. I also do research about the future of philanthropy. This was actually something that I happened into. It was very fortuitous. I spent about the first 15 years of my career begging foundations for money to do the things I wanted to do. And then the strange thing happened at the Institute for the Future that foundations came to us wanting advice and wanting to help think about their own future. And I've been lucky enough for the past 4 years to be having really deep conversations and serving as an advisor and a consultant to a number of big foundations, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Omidyar Network, the Hewlett Foundation, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, helping them to think about how philanthropy can push forward into the future and fund really innovative social change. Now here I am back at Berkeley. I've been teaching since 2015 at the Haas School of Business, and I also try to get out of Haas and into other parts of the campus as much as I can, and I really enjoyed doing that here at CITRIS in particular. At Haas, as I mentioned, I teach civic technology. I teach another course called Social Media and Social Movements. In that course, we explore the ways in which movements like Black Lives Matter, Arab Spring, and many, many others are using social media for social change. And we'll actually be publishing this year the Berkeley Guide to Social Media and Social Movements, which my students will be writing, and that will be designed as an entree and a document that can help people understand the ways in which different social movements use different platforms, sometimes create their own technology platforms, and how they're most effective at creating social change, and how they achieve policy outcomes in some cases, and in some cases don't. So now to the main topic of my talk, the Global Lives Project. So I started the Global Lives Project I had the idea for the Global Lives Project in 2002. It was actually when I was a junior here as an undergrad. I did a study abroad program. I traveled for 2 semesters to 5 different countries. I went to Tanzania, India, the Philippines, Mexico, and the UK. And in each of those countries, I lived with families. I lived in a former squatter settlement in Mexico City. I lived in a bamboo house in the Philippines. I lived in a mansion in New Delhi with 5 servants. These experiences in these different homes, sharing the daily lives of these people, really changed me. And when I got back, I had what I call a quintuple dose of culture shock. And it really made it impossible for me to return to my life and return to thinking about the world as I had before I had left. And that's where I got the idea for Global Lives. The original idea was to document 24 hours in the daily life of 10 people from 10 different places around the world, and put those videos into an exhibit where you walk into a room and you are surrounded by screens, and each of those screens offers you a window, a portal into viewing and thinking yourself into the daily life of a person that you otherwise could never have known. That was 2002 that I had the idea. We started filming in 2004. And in 2010, we premiered the first set of 10 shoots at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. It was the most heavily tweeted event in the history of the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts at that time. We had more than 1,000 people show up at our opening night. And it was a great experience. And since then, we've taken the exhibit to quite a few other venues. We've done screenings and exhibits at places like the United Nations University in Tokyo, the Smithsonian, Harvard, and many other venues in other countries as well. So the most recent exhibit that we did was actually at Lincoln Center for the New York Film Festival last year. That opened in October and it ran for a month. And I want to show you a trailer from the exhibit at the New York Film Festival. I was hoping I would show you a trailer So the idea of Lives in Transit was to build on that initial concept, those initial 10 shoots, which we now call the first 10 shoots, and add a new series, a new set that focused on transportation workers or lives in transit. Basically what we defined as people who move people or stuff anywhere in the world. And we used similar demographic criteria to the first 10 to pick those 10 people. And you'll actually be able to see in the CITRIS Tech Museum those videos from the Lives in Transit series. And this exhibit is actually the premiere of Lives in Transit, and also in a few other locations, a retrospective of our past work. And it's the premiere on the West Coast. So one of the big questions, when I was an undergrad here, I actually took an art class where my professor said, good art doesn't give answers, it asks questions. So these are some of the questions that I'm trying to ask. And again, I see myself as a sociologist as much as an artist and an ethnographer, maybe a filmmaker in this process. I have a little bit of a schizophrenic interdisciplinarity complex. But one of these questions, what could global empathy look like? And this is a big one. What does it mean to empathize with people in other parts of the world, people who you've never met, people who you've never seen, who you can't even talk to? Another big question, what are the boundaries of your moral universe? Where does your morality start? Probably with your family, yourself, your neighbors. But where does it end? Where do you start to apply different moral standards for your responsibilities to other people? So how many people, I'd like to ask a question of the audience. Does anyone know or want to make an estimate or a guess at how many Iraqis died in the Iraq War between 2003 and 2011? Yeah. 2 million? Anyone else? How many? 4,000? Others? 100,000? 500,000? 3 million. That's really interesting. In this room of probably some of the most educated people in this country, our estimates are varying by multiple orders of magnitude. And I think that, that says something alone. One of the probably best estimates is this household survey that concluded around 500,000 Iraqis died. This is a war that took place during all of our lifetimes that we funded with our taxpayer dollars, that our media reported on to us, that our media reported perhaps in a biased way. Our media reported very clearly the numbers of American troops and Americans who died in this conflict. And our media did not report in clear ways the numbers of Iraqis who died, because if they had, we would know, right? Or at least we wouldn't have estimates varying by orders of magnitude. And I think that is a moral fact that we all need to grapple with in our lives today. And as we continue in America's longest war right now in Afghanistan, as we continue to send more troops and we continue to destabilize other parts of the world. So Global Lives is about asking that question and asking what that means, and also creating an opportunity for people to really step out. I want you to step out of your world and step into the worlds of these other people and think about the value of other people's lives. Think about what it would be like to be a 5-year-old girl in Kazakhstan whose parents run an orphanage. That's Jana there in the center. This was the exhibit opening at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts in the forum there at YBCA. And you can't quite see them, but there are 1,000 people under those screens. Each of those screens is 12 feet in diagonal. So I want to show a little infographic video that we made quite a while back. I think this was made in 2006, but it explained our initial process for selecting the demographics of the people that we feature in the Global Lives shoots.
The Global Lives project set out to document 24 hours in the daily life of 10 people who roughly represent the diversity of humanity.
From the most intimate to the most mundane moments, our crews patiently watched, turning themselves over to the pace and rhythms of lives not their own.
Geography. 61% of the world's population lives in Asia, so we selected 6 Asians and 1 person each from the other 4 major world regions: North America, South America, Africa, and Europe.
We also learned that more than half of the world lives in cities, so we chose 5 urban and 5 rural people.
Income. We conducted detailed economic research to select 10 people whose earnings roughly represent global income distribution.
Gender. Half men, half women.
Religion. The actual religious distribution of the planet.
Age. The actual age distribution of the planet. 6 of the 10 people are under 30 years old.
So after we finished 10, there was a big problem, which was how do we pick the 11th person, right? And I actually had a friend and supporter, a collaborator, Lauren Carpenter. Some of you may have heard of. He's credited as being the inventor of RenderMan, Pixar's software that they use, and one of the the fathers of computer graphics. And how many engineers, mathematicians, computer scientists are in the room? Raise your hands. Okay, we have quite a few. Lauren had Fractal? Yes, yeah. Yeah, yes. So Lauren and I have known each other for a long time, in part through the BlackRock Arts Foundation, which is the art foundation that the people who started Burning Man founded to fund civic and participatory art not at Burning Man. And that was actually the first grant that Global Lives ever got. Lauren, I asked this question, how do we pick the 11th person? And he said, oh, it's really simple, David. You just need a 7-dimensional million cell by million cell matrix, and then you need to use simulated annealing to calculate, to optimize the maximum distance between people as you add people into each of these dimensions, the dimensions being what I described before: geography, age, state subdivisions, language, family. And Lauren was brilliant, and it took me about 2 years to understand what he was talking about. But eventually, I think I did, and we started building this. And Lauren actually wrote some code for this that we're still working on implementing, but this actually did inform the process of picking the 10 people for the Lives in Transit series. We discovered that there were actually two things we wanted to optimize for. One was diversity, and the other was representativity. And if you want an easy way to understand the difference between diversity and representativity, all you have to think about is the United States House of Representatives and the United States Senate, right? The Senate is diversity, the House is representativity. And what this meant for Global Lives is, if we've already done one shoot in Japan, since Japan is a relative, well, here, I'll give an example here. If we've already done one shoot, yeah, Japan is the top one there. So they have a representativity score there of 0.81. That's in red because that means that if we add more people, it causes problems. So they would be, they're now 5% of the future OSPs, on-screen participants is what we call OSPs, but they're actually only 1.86% of the world population. So they're 5% of the Global Lives collection, they're 1.86% of the Global Lives collection. That means before we ever go back to Japan and produce another 24-hour shoot in Japan, we need to get to about 50, 70 people before we consider going back there, so that because we've met the diversity goal, and we've also met the representativity goal. You can imagine how this works. So if you maximize for diversity, first you do a shoot in every single country in the world, and then you go back and start to do more. If you maximize for representativity, you do a whole bunch of shoots in China and India before you get to most of the other countries in the world. And so we try to balance those two, which is challenging. And this is the spreadsheet that we use to do a lot of that. So Global Lives has been going on for quite a while, as I mentioned. So the idea, 2002, the first shoot, 2004. This is actually a timeline from our impact report that you can download on our website of the different shoots that we've done, the different exhibits that we've done. One of the interesting things about Global Lives is that it's pretty much driven, I'd say 99% of the labor for Global Lives has been contributed by volunteers. That's volunteer filmmakers. It's especially volunteer translators, photographers, the people who appear in the videos are all volunteering their time to do this. And actually Global Lives today, for the last 2 years, has no employees. We're a very dispersed, distributed organization. We have a small office in San Francisco at the 9th Street Independent Film Center where we keep a bunch of projectors and a whole lot of hard drives. And that's this structure of this organization, which makes it kind of strange, but it's actually, I think, in a way, made it much more enduring than if we had some kind of different structure that required us to keep having money coming in all the time. And I've had a number of moments where people have proposed, oh, I know an ad exec at Coca-Cola. You could make this the Coca-Cola Global Lives project. They would have it, and on every vending machine, and this would be spectacular. And you could show video of people drinking Coca-Cola all over the world. It would bring people together. It would all your goals, your mission. It's perfect alignment. And I didn't do that. And and there were a lot of other opportunities like that. And I've tried to really, especially in the last few years, decouple my income from my ability to participate in Global Lives and be involved in Global Lives, which is part of the reason why Global Lives today is largely being developed by students at UC Berkeley, and that's a large part of the labor that's taking place. So video production, we started producing shoots in 2004. This is our total number of shoots all the way up to 2013 when we did our last one. We're in a distribution phase right now. So on that research front, I had an interesting meeting about 5 years ago at this place, the Smithsonian Castle. I got a meeting with two anthropologists that work at Smithsonian. One as part of the National Museum of Natural History, the most visited museum in the United States, home of big dinosaur skeletons and the Hope Diamond, and also home of the largest anthropology department, I believe, in the US and possibly the world. NMNH gets the diamond brings them in. Yeah, you can look at maybe the stats are different. Yeah, I'll double check that stat. Yeah, thank you. It is the same museum. They're down the mall from each other. So I was in this meeting with these two anthropologists, and they said, David, they wanted me to tell them. They said, can you tell us more about your methodology? And I said, oh, wow, I thought I was here with my artist hat on. I didn't know I was here with my methodology hat on. But it turned out that the previous year, I had been working with a team of volunteers from Adobe, the people who make Photoshop, to develop this production guide. And the production guide actually is a set of standards that we wrote after the first 10 shoots to really guide how to do a 24-hour shoot. And this is something that we distributed to all of the producers of the Lives in Transit series, and we were told was very helpful. So this walks you through everything from how to assemble the crew, how to create a liaison and a relationship with the community, how to do all of the equipment that you need, and lots of detail. This is also available for free on our website. This is the website. So the Lives in Transit series and also the website have been supported by grants from the National Endowment for the Arts, as well as from the Adobe Foundation. I encourage you to check out the website. The website will be growing over the course of this year. As we're showing this exhibit at Berkeley, we'll be adding, in addition to the 240 hours in the lives of 10 people that are on the website now, you'll be able to view an additional 240 hours of the Lives in Transit people, the on-screen participants. And we'll be rolling that out on social media and on the website, all with the help of, or actually led by the students here in the front of the room. And so I encourage you to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. This is an exhibit we did at Google headquarters. Actually, Google has been a very valuable supporter. This is last year, and this is Google headquarters in New York. This is the exhibit at Lincoln Center, just to give you a sense of that. And this is actually Envision Academy, a high school in Oakland on Webster Street. And we've actually done a lot of exhibits at high schools. The education program actually started in Indonesia. We had a teacher in Indonesia actually request that we do a workshop at the National Teachers Association of Indonesia meeting in 2011. And this workshop in Jakarta actually generated, they had watched the videos with subtitles in Indonesian. We do a lot of subtitling from a lot of languages into English and also into many other languages as well. So these teachers in Indonesia suggested that Global Lives would be perfect for a number of different types of classroom settings, ranging from world studies, social studies, history, all the way to statistics or sociology, anthropology, geography. So they really kicked that off. We did some exhibits at schools in China, in Singapore, in San Francisco. And again, I have to say this word, but we worked with Stanford. I'm sorry. We worked with Stanford grad students at the School of Education to produce the Unheard Stories curriculum. And this is actually available for purchase on Amazon.com. And this is a 64-page curriculum that is designed based on Common Core curriculum standards. And it is for cultivating empathy in middle school and high school classrooms. And I encourage you to check it out. So we did do some research pre and post after an exhibit that we did at Palo Alto High School. We found that 44% of students surveyed after the Global Lives exhibit indicated that they feel protective of someone who is being taken advantage of, compared to 22% before. 30% speak up when they witness something they consider wrong, compared to 15% before. 26% take interest in community and world issues and often seek solutions, compared to 8% before. 37% feel that they can make a positive difference in the 37% feel that they can make a positive difference in the world, compared to 21% before. So these are some encouraging statistics. It's a small sample size, but I'm very interested in expanding this and doing some more studies, perhaps even here on the Berkeley campus while this exhibit is running across the hall. We'll be able to implement some of that. So some of the next steps are also to add longitudinal measures to this, so that we can check back in a year or 2 years or 5 years and see if this actually made a durable difference in how people think about the world and what they do. So critically important, this exhibit here at UC Berkeley. The exhibit opens here, but this is actually the very first time we've done a multi-venue exhibit in the same city or on the same campus. So this exhibit, the CITRIS version of the exhibit, the CITRIS location, will actually run for the longest. It opens today, and it runs through May. The exhibit will also open at the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive on October 24th and run until December 29th. All of these dates, by the way, are in this brochure that all of you should have seen. And if you didn't, please grab one or grab many of them on your way out. I should just tell you also, they were designed to be pretty posters, both on the front and the back, so you can take them and staple them up to the many bulletin boards all over the campus. And then again, the dates for all the exhibits and the events that have been scheduled so far, we plan to schedule more events, are in there. So, yeah, it opens at Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive October 24th. On December 3rd, there will be a panel discussion with a few of our filmmakers. Daniel Chen will be speaking there. And then the exhibit also opens at the Phoebe Hearst Museum of Anthropology around the same time frame in October. Actually, they're setting it up today. And at the Haas School of Business, where I teach in Chu Hall, that exhibit will open in the spring in what I think is the newest building on campus. And that will be the fourth of these venues. I think it might be the first time ever these four institutions have collaborated on something at all. Definitely something like this, and it's been a real privilege for me to do this. And I have to say, after the funding for this initially came from the David Eckles Fund for Diversity and Social Impact, which is a fund at Haas. And that funded the Haas portion of the exhibit. But once I was spending some time over here at CITRIS, I realized that it didn't make sense just to have the exhibit at Haas. If we were bringing it to the campus, we could do it in multiple places. And it's just been an incredible partnership with CITRIS to be able to work with you. And obviously, we did something right, because this is the first exhibit that's actually up and ready and running. So I encourage all of you to tell your friends to check out the exhibit. And I'd love to take any questions at this point. So thank you so much for having me. And if you could say your name and your department also, that would be great too.
Shicha Liu from architecture. I was just wondering, have you had a chance to take a shoot or take a shot of the real rich person, although they are only a small fraction of the population, but really control probably 90% of the social wealth? And what students were the visitors show the video? Oh, they have private island. They take drive the luxury cars. What's the perception might be?
That's a great question. Yeah, actually, so when I showed this exhibit at Palo Alto High School, I did an assembly, and one of the students said, "How come it's all poor people?" And that's it's actually not all poor people. So to be in the top decile of global income distribution, last time I checked, this is a few years ago, you need to make roughly more than $36 per day, and that's according to World Bank Purchasing Power Parity corrected figures. So we have two people that make more than $36 per day in the 20 Global Lives participants so far. One of them is James Bullock, the cable car driver in San Francisco. It's a union job. They pay reasonably well. And his wife was a construction supervisor, and she also was in a union in San Francisco, and that paid well too. What you might call blue-collar jobs, but definitely a lot more than $36 a day, even though James did not have a college degree. And the second person in that top decile is Pierre Vallet, boat captain on the St. Lawrence River in Canada, and he lives in Trois-Rivières, which is outside of Quebec. And so he has a very so James and Nina, they actually live pretty close to me in San Francisco in Noe Valley, and they have a great house with a nice view. And definitely, when you watch that footage of James, he goes surfing. He has a band that he plays in. Also, he has what I would say is a pretty enviable quality of life, actually. And with Pierre, it's kind of similar. He does have to get up in the middle of the night at an ungodly hour to go and get on the boat and be the captain of this boat. It looks like a pretty stressful job. But he comes home. He washes his impressive motorcycle. He has a really nice suburban house, and it's again not what you'd call an elite. But someone who does well. We also recorded a college student in Tokyo, Rumi Nagashima, and she was a student at the time, so her income was not above $36 a day because she was basically paying to be a student at that time. But now and later in her life, she's likely to exceed that. And in future shoots, we may do I sometimes thought about Global Lives as instead of it being lifestyles of the rich and famous, it's lifestyles of the poor and vulnerable. But it's not exactly that, because the idea is to show both sides. And I think that's an important question, but I hope you'll take some time to look at the video of Pierre. He does have a really nice house in Trois-Rivières.
My name is Alexandra Perkins. I am an undergraduate in the anthropology department, and I also work for the Hearst Museum of Anthropology. And I was just wondering if you kept track of the people who are depicted in the videos.
Yeah, some of them I'm able to keep track of more than others, really because of the distributed nature of the organization. It's the producers and directors of each of these shoots. So I do keep in touch. I only went to 3 of the 20 locations as a crew member. Really, I'm not actually good at operating a camera, so I try not to do that. I did that on the first shoot, and it was some of the worst footage from the whole day. And these cameras have about 50 buttons on them, and it's like playing a piano or something. You need to learn how to use it. But anyway, I just carried heavy equipment during the shoot in China, and not even that heavy because I'm not very strong. And so through different crews, I keep up with James. I'm actually going to see him in a couple weeks. He's having a party for the birthday of his shed in his backyard. He does that every year. So, and I'll be going there to see him. And then Jael Feliciano, the person who we recorded in Sao Paulo, Brazil, when I was living there, he was a really just, I would say, pretty much unknown hip-hop singer when we did the shoot with him in 2006. He was also working as a city permit inspector, where he would go see if street vendors had permits, and if they didn't, he would have to ask them to get off of the street and stop selling things. That was his job. Now he is world famous. He has played at Coachella. And I don't think it's due to Global Lives, though the Global Lives videos of him have way more traffic on YouTube than so many of the others. And also, whenever his publicist retweets our stuff, it gets way more pickup. So that's, and I do try to see Jael when I am in Brazil, and when he happens to be in Brazil and not be starring in his next music video. So those are the ones I keep up with. The crews, but the other crews have definitely kept in touch. For example, there was one of the shoots. I should mention one of the events that's listed in here is going to be a talk with Jason Price, who is a PhD student in the anthropology department. He actually produced the shoot in Malawi, and Malawi was actually his field research country for where he did all of his dissertation research. And he actually raised money so that Edith, the girl at the time who he videotaped, could go to high school. And that was pretty much a foregone conclusion that she was not going to go to high school before the shoot took place. But Jason raised money by running 10Ks, 5Ks, I think eventually maybe a marathon, to support her going to school.
Yes, quick question.
Yeah.
7 dimensions seems to work pretty well, but have you had thoughts about another dimension that would improve the diversity in some other area?
Yeah, I mean, sexuality is one that I think about a lot. That's really complicated, right? Because, the famous 51 different choices for sexual orientation that Facebook rolled out at one point. I think it was 51. How do you, and there's no global data that I know of that's reliable about that. And so that's been definitely a challenging one. Gender is also a challenging one today to think about. And another is occupation. So occupational data, there are a few data sources that claim to have global occupational data, but I mean, find someone who can tell me exactly how many transportation workers there are in the world, or even within some margin of error. There are very few data sources that will give you that stuff, and it's partly because different censuses in different countries and parts of the world use totally different categories that are inconsistent. So that's something I would love to get really good data on, and expand this as we go forward. Great question, thank you.
Yeah. So I'm Victor Chung, undergrad in computer science.
Okay.
And I'm wondering, what do you think are some of the incentives and the motivation for the volunteers that are working, so hard for this, and how are you guys, supporting them, and Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So, you know, for the first 5 years of working on Global Lives, roughly 5, I was a volunteer myself. I didn't get paid. There was a point when we started getting funding from the National Endowment for the Arts that the board of directors and others started to think, David, you should get paid. If we want to start getting funding like this, we need a paid executive director. And so I started getting paid as a part-time employee. Global Lives has never been a full-time job for me. And I had about 4 years where it was something like a third of my income, roughly. And I did that very specifically telling myself that when I started getting paid by Global Lives, I wanted to make sure that if the money ever dried up, that the project wouldn't dry up. And I thought about that from the perspective of, a social movement organizer or, an activist, the way I had been, surrounded by communities of activists as an undergrad here. And, that was a big part of it. And during those first 5 years, the way I talked about it and the way I thought about it was, this is kind of, God, I should have talked more about this. I've done a lot of research about open source software communities. And in particular, Debian was the one that I found really interesting. Debian, for those of you who don't know, is a Linux distribution. Debian does not, at the time that I was doing research on it, does not have employees. Correct me if I'm wrong. Debian has an elected maintainer who's kind of an authority figure on an annual basis. And I thought that was a really, really interesting structure to have this globally important technology structure that generates a lot of value for a lot of people that is built by volunteers. I also spent a lot of time studying Wikipedia and looking how the Wikipedia community functions. They now have hundreds of employees, but for their first few years they didn't, and that was another interesting model. And you think about why do people contribute to open source projects like Wikipedia or like Debian? And I think there are a few different reasons. It's hard to cite them all, but one of them is this idea of the reputational economy which is critical in academia. And if you're an academic and you're trying to publish a journal article, you pay to submit it sometimes. Or if you're trying to get a book out, you might pay a fee to submit the manuscript. You don't make money on your intellectual production. And for me, this idea, since I was, at the time that I was doing this, a graduate student in sociology, and I had this idea that I would go on to get a PhD in sociology, which I forgot to ever do, but I thought I would do that, and I thought I would go be a sociology professor, and I thought that's how Global Lives would fit into my personal goals. It worked out differently. Now I teach at a business school, which don't ask me how that happened. But yeah, so... or you can ask me, I'll tell you the whole story. But yeah, so I really thought of it as akin to academic publishing, as akin to contributing to Wikipedia. You become part of a community. The community recognizes your reputational value in different ways and promotes you into positions where perhaps you can make a living. I'm just a lecturer at Haas. It's not a reliable source of revenue, but I think Global Lives was part of the reason that I ended up there, and I know that a lot of the filmmakers, producers, volunteers that have worked on Global Lives see the similar value. A lot of our translators request certificates showing that they participated, that they volunteered. For some of them, they get class credit. A lot of my students get class credit. Sometimes they even get a grade for the work they're doing on Global Lives. And a lot of them, it becomes a really important part of their resume. I have to tell you, when the Lives in Transit producers heard that we got accepted into the New York Film Festival, and when they got invitations to Lincoln Center, and when we even had a little bit of money to fly some of them to New York for the first time even in the United States for some of them. Same thing with Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. We found a little bit of money from some consulates to bring these filmmakers from other places to the US for the first time to see their work shown. That was a life-changing experience and something to remember and be proud of for the rest of their lives and also for mine. I hope that's kind of a long answer to your question, but I hope that answers it.
Yeah. Veda, electrical engineering PhD from here. Right now an affiliate, but it's a very interesting program. Thank you. Mike, you said cultural change is what's going to cause the political change. And as a country, this is a very divided country here. We have two phases, seems to be, either a war phase or a help phase to the world. And so how do we make it a kind of a more unified country? Do we have any program that will see this country's problem and try to address it in the same way?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I'm trying to do here. It's a long-term project, but trying to change cultural beliefs, trying to increase the amount of empathy in the United States and increase the amount of empathy in the world, increase this sense. For a long time I used this term global citizenship. Didn't work well with all audiences, so I kind of stopped using it and talked more about global empathy. But creating this sense of global empathy, of global citizenship, that someone on the other side of the world, that their life has as much value as someone who lives on the other side of the street from you, that's my goal. And that's it's a long-term cultural change project, and it's a difficult one. It's difficult to measure, and I think the difficulty to measure has actually created a difficulty to fund, because so many philanthropists want to see measurement and measurable results. But your question is exactly what I'm trying to do, and there are other people doing similar things, and I think they're running against similar challenges to what I'm running into. But I think I'm over time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David.